Hello, Exiles, and welcome to a less optimistic video about 0.3, because of course these are going to happen. In this case, we're here to talk about Armour. I feel like this has to be said and gotten out there for people who are planning to start Warrior and whatnot, because people who are a little more experienced with the actual usage of bottom left side tree defenses in Path of Exile 2 were very bearish on how things are going. Bearish as in they're not the most optimistic, very conservative, sometimes outright negative. And honestly, some things that I've learned about how certain mechanics work have kind of driven me in that corner as well. The first thing I want to mention is they made this change here, right, to Giant's Blood Keystone. This is not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things, but in a vacuum, specifically the vacuum we are in currently, where you're really your only melee weapon, bottom left side, that is like easy to make use of, are two-handed maces. One-handed maces lose out because they are faster, to give it like a better DPS, or rather not better, but like a competitive DPS amount. Problem is that mace skills do not reward you for being faster. It's very few and far between that a mace skill actually has, the mechanics in it to not punish you in that way directly. There are some small changes, maybe that would kind of go in favor of this, like Sunder being changed to not have a flat base attack time. Flat-based attack time is really bad. It is doubly bad if you're one-handed mace, because again, any speed that you're getting from the weapon as a trade-off is completely lost, which is like, you can almost consider it a less damage multiplier versus the quality of a two-handed weapon, which makes this much more impactful in the current state of the game. Obviously, at some point, we'll get swords, we'll get axes, and those will probably scale off of attack speed much better, and you won't feel this quite nearly as much. And the reason, of course, this is necessary to talk about is that bottom left side tree, you are supposed to have more raw HP than a bottom right side tree, which is where evasion is. Factor in now that getting to 100% deflect rating is possible, and that reduces the damage you take by 40%, pretty much baseline. If you are a character with 2,000 life, right, and you have 100% deflect rating, and you are comparing yourself to a character with 2,800 life, you are actually equivalent. That's a very big deal for a lot of reasons. Specifically, you can do very nice scaling tricks with certain recovery methods like life gain on hit that become much more efficient when your actual total life pool is lower. It makes things like evasion, energy shield that much more powerful because it also applies to your energy shield. It would work the same with, say, mind over matter, etc. This is an important thing to consider. That is a very powerful bulk multiplier to your effective HP pool. Whereas Armour already has kind of not the best rule of thumb for scaling. Now, these numbers are a little bit outdated because in 0.1.1, Armour was made, I think, 15% more effective overall. But the rule of thumb is still good to follow. If you want to prevent 1/3 of damage from a hit, you need 5 times the damage in armor value, right? You need 500 armor to prevent 1/3 of the damage from a 100 damage hit. This is why really big hits make Armour look stupid, because getting 30 times the armor of a massive 3,000 damage hit is a lot more difficult than, say, getting the evasion necessary to avoid it some of the time. So already you're kind of seeing, wow, deflection is probably an inherently stronger mechanic than, say, armor applying to elemental. The thing is, because armor is up all the time, it kind of wins back a little bit in consistency. And deflection has to work to get that consistency, whereas armor has to work to get comparable reduction to deflect. The trade-off here, ultimately, because deflect is often getting the benefit of evasion on top of it, is that A, you should either be able to get more raw life, which then kind of sways things in favor and kind of makes up for the lack of evasion, or B, you should be able to get your actual damage reduction higher than the 40% of deflect, right? That's kind of the general gist of it. In order for these things to be comparable, they need to match up that way. Here's where everything falls apart. In the most recent update notes, flowing metal for Smith of Kitava was changed from 30% or 35% of armor applies to elemental damage from hits to 50. That's a pretty big increase. It's pretty nice. This is already replacing a node that would have given you +5 maximum fire resistance. The reason why the +5 maximum fire resistance was so good back in the day is because you could kind of super invest into fire resistance and then make it apply to your other resistances and get a tremendous, like, incredible amount of elemental mitigation, and that made Smith of Kitava very popular. The reason for this, of course, is because Smith of Kitava could also get a lot of armor and then get a very high HP pool. So we've lost Giant's Blood, which is not, I shouldn't say lost Giant's Blood. Giant's Blood has been nerfed, so using a two-hander means that you now either have to shift investment to more damage, or you have to shift investment to more life. And it is hard to invest in life if you're not just investing in strength, and they just made investing in strength worse. Not a great start. The other thing to consider, and this is really the most important, is Path of Exile 2 doesn't have things like physical damage taken as an element. If it did, this would be almost kind of a double dip scenario, where now your armor is contributing to something that is supposed to be offloaded to your resistances. That would be very cool if you could get it in like considerable, meaningful amounts. That would suddenly make it so that you could make your physical damage mitigation very high, but they haven't really done that. So now we are at a point where you do not have as much life as before. Deflection is generally just better with a much easier investment curve. The notable that made Smith of Kitava so strong has been outright changed to this new thing. And this is where things really start to, we'll say decompose, because what needs to be said, and why we talked about the rule of thumb here, is that you need lots of armor for big hits. But armor is incredibly good against small hits. So if you took 5,000 fire damage, and you're 75% fire res, cut that down to 3,750. I hope that's the correct amount. I didn't do a calculator beforehand. But yeah, so it takes off 3,750. We'll just say you have 1,250 damage as like your come through, and then your armor applies to that on some amount. That's really good, because armor versus 1,250 damage, right? If you want to cut out half the damage, you only need 10 times the armor. That's very achievable. What if it worked the other way? And as I've learned recently, it does. It works the other way. Armor, or rather the elemental, or armor applying to elemental damage applies before the resistance. So instead, you have this armor value fighting not against 1,250 fire damage, but 5,000. So you're going to get a much smaller reduction from the bulk value, and then it will apply to your resistance. That's not great. That's, you're going to have to work very hard to get the damage reduction you need. And I think the irony right here is that if you want to make a very good Smith of Kitava build, you probably go spears, because you want to use a different one-handed weapon, and they relax the requirements on stats overall. So the irony being you would have less strength probably on that build, but because you don't need to go into Giant's Blood, you would have more strength contributing to life. That's wacky, it's unintuitive, and it kind of shows poor planning on the part of the developers. I'm concerned, obviously. I felt the need to make a video about this. I want people to know bottom left side defenses, unless there's something very impactful coming on the skill tree that we don't know about, like increased percent life nodes, which that would fix it pretty much. That would like go a long way towards fixing things. It either needs to be that, or I don't know. Maybe you can get armor applying to elemental damage at 300% value. Probably not. None of the values we've seen seem to imply that. It looks like maybe with a certain unique item, with Black Braid, you could get the value very high, but then you are using Black Braid, which isn't known for its base armor value being particularly strong. It's being known for giving you this value beforehand. This is, it's worrisome, okay? All I'm gonna say is the tier list putting Deadeye at the top are like that for a reason. If you are going on the left side of the tree and investing into armor, be very careful and consider going hybrid with energy shield or hybrid with evasion. If you can get armor to a good value with good deflect yourself, I would say that's another story altogether, because obviously that is potentially a best of both worlds situation, like Tactician, right? Tactician looks very exciting. If you can get to max, deflect value on a fully armor invested character with that node they have, great. Nah, you're having a great time. That's the way forward. But I would say Warrior, Smith of Kitava, Warbringer, all that stuff, Titan. Be careful. If you have a trusted build creator who knows what they're doing, sure. But I think it was Alkaiser who said that the only thing that killed his left side character last league was a physical hit. It was a physical hit, man. If they're losing their amazing elemental mitigation from Smith of Kitava, it could be a massacre. And I'm not saying that it's going to be bad the whole league, but I very much so at this point am predicting there's going to be a mid-league buff to armor values and how this all works. I would not be surprised if they swap the calculation order, in fact. Because the way armor is bad against bigger hits really kind of dampens any interest I have in the armor applying to element, unless you can scale it way beyond 100%. Because consider that you are normally already reducing it by like 75% baseline. It's not a great situation. I'm very bearish on it now as well. And I just thought someone, hopefully everyone, is sounding the alarm on how this is maybe not the type of character you want to start with in a league where we are going to be dealing with Abyss and probably some of the craziest sources of incoming damage, especially at the start of the league when things are almost certainly going to be a little overtuned. Anyway, have a good one. I hope this didn't bum you out, especially if you were planning to do a warrior type build, but it's got to be said, you know? Have a good one, Exiles.